Well, good morning. Some of you may have noticed, I walked to the back of the sanctuary after the meditation there. I was trying to make a break for it, but Sylvan and Jim tackled me. And they said I have to say something else, so I thought the meditation would be good enough. But I want to pause for a moment. First, to thank the music team and the choir. It's like, wow, you guys are really great. And as you heard, Carl and I visited like 250 congregations, in our travels when we were doing a seminar ministry, and you guys really got a good team here, and it was nice to meet David and have a chance to talk with him yesterday. Want to thank the search team. I mean, you need to understand that, they got to go through all the resumes, then they've got to call, and we did, online Skype kind of interviews, and then they had to kind of winnow it down and give it to the board, and that reminds me, of course, I want to thank the board of trustees. Anytime you're going through a time without a minister, it's extremely challenging, and so I appreciate all of the effort that these two teams have really put in, and I also appreciate you for giving me the opportunity to come and just share a little bit about myself today. So, let's get started. Have you ever had the desire to do something, and then you got the opportunity to do it, and it didn't go the way you planned? Well, when I was a young kid growing up in Chicago, I discovered I had a passion, and that passion was football. And so, as a young 9-year-old and 10-year-old, I'm playing football, on the side streets of Chicago or in the parks, But, you get to that point in life of maturity, say age 12 or 13, where you want to play real football, where you strap on the pads and the helmet, and I'm sitting in 7th grade at my Roman Catholic grammar school in Chicago, and they make an announcement that they're going to form a team, and they're going to be part of an organized league the next year. And I thought, this is great. This is what I've been waiting for. And on the day of tryouts, you see, I'd found Dad's old 1940s era leather football helmet in the closet, you say. And I've got a shiny new dime for someone who can tell me, first person who can tell me who that is afterwards out there, okay? Shiny new dime. It's a real motivation there. So I go out for tryouts. Now picture this, I'm 5'1", 90 pounds, wearing this football helmet. And that was the reaction I got that day too. But I surprised a lot of people because I made the team. They said I had spunk. Spunk does not mean I played first string. And if you're not playing first string, for those of you who are football fans, you need to play special teams. Special teams are the nicknames for when you have the kickoff. So you've got the kickoff team and the kickoff return team. And then you've got the punt team and the punt return team, so that when there's a transition in the game, if there has been no score on it for a punt. So my first football game. I'm decked out in my uniform. I've got Kelly green helmet, Kelly green jersey, with my number, which I can't remember what it was back then. And I'm excited. My first football game. I'm on the kickoff team now. You got 11 guys spread out across the field, and you're supposed to run down your lane so that if the ball carrier comes into your lane, you tackle them. But the other team knows that, so they assign someone to block each of those lanes. So I'm excited. I'm pumped. First football game, I'm looking downfield at who's been assigned to block me. This is the biggest, the meanest 8th grader I've ever seen in my life. I think he was shaving already. So I'm a bright young lad. I realize this is going to take a little finesse. So the ball's kicked off, I run at him, and I figured I'd just scamper by him with my superior agility and speed. I found that I did not have superior agility and speed. So the second kickoff, I'm out there, and it's like, okay, this is going to take a lot more finesse than I did last time. So I'm running at him, and I attempted to fake him out. I went to the left, but then went to the right, and he flattened me again. So I sat up and I looked out the ear hole of my football helmet. And why did I decide I wanted to play football again? And I went over on the sideline and I did what any Unity minister would tell me to do, and that was pray. Oh God, I don't want to die today. Guide me, what should I do? And this feeling came to me, this gut feeling. And it just seemed so stupid. I thought, no. But we were doing pretty well. We scored again, so the kickoff comes, and I'm out there looking at Mr. 8th grade shaving guy over here. And this feeling comes back. And I thought, well, what the heck? What do I have to lose, right? So this time the ball is kicked off, and I run straight at him. But instead of slowing down to finesse him, I sped up. I leaned forward with my head pointed at his chest to get within about 3 feet of him, and I let out a primal scream. His eyes bug out, he steps back, and I roar right by him untouched. And then I got in on the tackle, and I remembered why I wanted to play football. It is a little bit more fun to be the flattener rather than to be flattened. But it was an important lesson. It was one of those early spiritual guidance lessons. Here's football. I mean, how important is football, really? But whatever our challenges in life, if we're willing to say, God, help, the guidance comes. And like I said, it seems silly. It seems stupid. But this gut feeling was so strong. I went ahead and tried it. And over the years, I found I don't question it anymore. I don't try it. I might be scared silly, but I go ahead and do it. And there it was. There was the answer. How to address that particular situation. Now, the gut feeling that we get is wisdom. Now, how many of you are familiar with the 12 powers concept, the 12 powers of human beings? For those of you who aren't, Charles Fillmore got this insight in one of his meditations, the 12 powers of man. Each one of us have been given these 12 gifts to realize that they're there and activate them by just acknowledging them. And these align with the 7 chakras. A lot of people are familiar with the energy centers, the 7 primary chakras, but there are secondary and tertiary chakras too. And it's amazing, the alignment, because Charles, was familiar with the chakra concept, but this vision came to him of the number 12 and how often you'd have groups of 12 in the Bible, including the 12 disciples. And the 12 disciples represents each one of these gifts. When you read that, recognize what their names mean and their characteristics. So think of the 12 disciples as faith, strength, wisdom, love, power, imagination, understanding, will, order, zeal, renunciation, and then human life. You have all 12 of those within your consciousness, within your body. These are spiritual powers, so it's spiritual strength and spiritual power. And when we call them forth to us, they can work with us. And that was the symbolism of Jesus, right? He went out there 40 days, 40 nights, just praying, meditating, and then he got to a level of spiritual consciousness where he had to gather his disciples and call them all forward, and then they went out to do great work. Now, James Zebedee represents that wisdom, or actually, Charles Fillmore had called it judgment. Good judgment, though. But, the word judgment over the last 100 years has become synonymous with condemnation. Don't be judgmental. Right? But what are you really saying? It's like, don't condemn me. But judgment is a good word. I mean, we all need good judgment. So in the Gospel of Matthew, 14th chapter, starting with the 23rd verse, Jesus Christ has just fed the 5,000, the loaves and fishes story that, seems like most people know. So let's pick it up there. He's done with that. Then he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side of the sea while he dismissed the crowds. And he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Here again, the symbolism of the Christ consciousness going into that meditation room. But I continue. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was many furlongs distant from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "Oh, it's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Have no fear." And Peter immediately answered him, "Lord, if it is you, bid me to come out with you onto the water." And Jesus says, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he turned his head, he saw the wind, and he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Powerful symbolism in that. Of course, people who take the Bible literally say, "Oh, well, what a wonderful miracle." But the symbolism of each of the characters in the sea, here we talked about, walking on hallowed ground. Well, there can be hallowed water too, right? So the boat is an individual consciousness. So if you're in, a boat, or if like you're in a house or in a mansion, in the Bible, what it means is this is within your own individual consciousness. Everything, all these people, all these characters in the Bible represent you and me. We all have these things going on within us at one point or another in our lives. The 12 disciples, as I said before, the 12 powers. Now, our 12 powers are out in the boat without the Christ consciousness. I've had those days in my life too where I'm out there and, I have been operating for the last couple hours with no awareness that I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And suddenly I'm having things happen to me that are unpleasant. So with them, they have a storm and the wind is contrary. And you have those days where you're just leaning into the wind saying, "Oh, God, when is this going to stop?" How many people are having a storm in their life right now? Yeah. Something tells me some of you just don't want to admit it. But we all have storms, right? We got the good days, we got the bad days, but the storms happen. And, the wind is in our face, and oh, man. But then we remember, oh, that's right, we forgot something. We need to go back to the house and get the Christ consciousness. And so the Christ consciousness. Now, the interesting thing was they didn't say, "Oh, where is the Christ consciousness?" did they? They were in it up to their knees. And Jesus came anyway. That Christ consciousness, that spiritual awareness within us. So even when we're having those days, and I haven't consciously thought the Christ consciousness, if you're lost, the Christ consciousness will find you. And on that day, like I said, suddenly I'll have to remember. I'll remember. I know Carla and I had an adventure when we were coming out here where we flew out on Thursday so we could adjust to the time frame. So we flew from Indianapolis to Chicago. And we get to Chicago, we all get on, it was just a nice 45-minute turnaround. So we get on the next plane, we're all loaded, ready to go. And they get on the speaker and says, "Well, there's this thunderstorm right outside of Chicago, and this plane flew through it, and there was hail, and it stripped the paint off the nose cone, and we're not allowed to fly this plane in this condition. So we're all going to need to get off. But we're in Chicago, so it's like, well, maybe we can find another plane. So about 2 hours later, they say, "Okay, you need to go down here about 200 feet to this other gate. There's a plane waiting for us." So we go down there, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. And then they come over the speaker and say, "You're not going to believe this, but this storm flew through the same storm. It didn't get hit by hail, but it got struck by lightning. And it kind of fried some of the electronics on the plane. Don't think you want to fly this plane either. But hang in there, we'll figure out something." So about 4 hours later, they gave us a speaker and said, "Well, we just decided to cancel the flight. So just go to a ticket counter or get on our courtesy phones here, and if you need to stay overnight, we'll put you up for the night." So I'm standing in line, and I'm just like, "Oh God, I don't want to have to fly there tomorrow and then turn around right away, have dinner with the search team." And I'm like, wait a minute, what would Reverend Bob Uhlar tell panicked Bob Uhlar about what he's supposed to do in this situation? And so I just took a nice deep breath and relaxed. I thought, okay, I know my preference. I want to be in Seattle tonight. I'm just going to know that everything will flow easily and effortlessly. And I was in this ticket counter line, so I got up to the front, and I could hear from the people before me. It's like, no, can't fly you out till tomorrow or Saturday. So I said, well, okay, I understand that. One question I have, though, is what happened to our luggage? And they said, well, it turns out there was another flight leaving for Seattle about 2 hours after yours that was full, so we couldn't get anybody out, but your luggage is on it, so your luggage will be waiting for you in Seattle. So I went over to one of the courtesy phones and got on the phone, and a woman from reservations, answered. And at first they had a computer, telling me, our next nonstop flight to Seattle is, tomorrow at 10:30, which will get me into Seattle. Like I said, just enough time to dash to the restaurant and meet the search team. And so I was like, here's my situation. I've got this really important job interview in Seattle, and I really would like to get there tonight. And I'm open to any way you can get me there. Other airlines connecting to another city, and so the woman very kindly just about 2 minutes, and she says, I can get you there. We're going to put you on an American Airlines flight to St. Louis, and then from there we'll put you on an American Airlines flight, or sorry, not American, an Alaskan Airlines flight to Seattle. And so instead of getting here at 4 o'clock on Thursday, we got here at 9:30 on Thursday. Well, we got here. But I realized, here I was standing in this line, and once again, we all forget. But like you said, then suddenly the Christ consciousness says, what are you forgetting here? And oh yeah, I just need to relax. So Jesus Christ comes to them. Now Jesus is walking on the water. So he's not hovering above it. He's not sinking in it. He's walking on the water. That means that the Christ consciousness is in contact with whatever challenge you've got in your life. Whatever challenge you've got in your life, God's got this. Provided you're aware that God is helping you. And then the feet represent understanding. That's why we take our feet off, because we're on hallowed ground. What they're saying is, you better make sure you've got clear, unobstructed understanding of the holiness that is here in you, in your life, every day. So Jesus is walking on, and God understands all of the challenges, the storms, the contrary winds that we're having. And Peter represents our faith. And yet, in our faith, we step out there. We are inspired. I was looking at 8th grade shaving guy, and I was inspired. I was standing in a ticket line, and I was inspired. So Peter gets out, starts walking, but what does Peter do? He looks away. So you set out, you're inspired, but all of a sudden, the wind is contrary. Things just aren't going very well. And the Christ consciousness reaches out and says, hey, you of little faith? Why did you doubt? So, and then of course, when the Christ consciousness steps into the boat, the wind ceases. So the Christ consciousness is fully in and embraced by our individual consciousness. Now let me clarify something. The words belief and faith are often interchangeable in our world today, but when it comes to spiritual principle, the effective place to place faith is in what you know as God. So yes, your faith allows you to just say yes to that. And then you have this other faculty, renunciation, where you have something come into your life and it's like, no, this is not what I'm going to align myself with. I mean, look at this congregation. I guess you guys are stepping out in faith right now, looking for a new minister. So when Carl and I first learned the unity prosperity principles, Edwin Gaines, who I know has been here, that was our introduction to the unity prosperity principles back in 1990, and she inspired us to go out and teach as well. So you learn, one, you need to set goals. Clear-cut, tangible goals, pick a deadline, and that way you're setting the intention for what it is you want to demonstrate. And then there's forgiveness. You need to untie the emotional attachment to your experiences. When you can get to the point when you can remember the incident or the person without reliving the anger of the person, yes, then you've gotten to the point where you understand the spiritual lesson of the situation. And of course, third is divine purpose. Recognizing what we were put on the earth to do. Each of us have gifts, passions, talents, something that you do better than anyone else. And it's up to you to discover that and do it. And sometimes there are chapters in our life where we do different things in different decades, right? And then, of course, there's tithing. And, of course, there's another prosperity teacher that talks about the 4T concept. We tithe of our time, our talent, and our treasure. So I'm learning the prosperity principles, and I'm thinking this tithing thing has got to be a scam, and I'm going to, at least for the time being, research it. And my prosperity teacher there in Chicago was like, well, I'll tell you what, when you get to the point where you can embrace these things, come back and we'll talk. And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, all right, well, I'm going to tithe of my time, devote some time each day to contemplating God. My talent, I'll volunteer, 4 hours a week, whether it's Unity or. But you need to get to that point where you're willing to give 10% of your gross income to where you're getting your spiritual inspiration. Carla and I had just had a change in our lives. We got married, and Carla quit her job working in human resources for this big accounting firm in Chicago, and I'm working for an all-news radio station in Chicago, WMAQ. Carla has quit her job, so suddenly our income had dropped significantly. So here I am looking at the budget and figuring out, well, okay, how much is left over after we pay all of our bills? And I found that we, at that point, had 3% disposable income. And I thought, God must not want me to blow my budget. See, God right there. And then it occurred to me that I just had my performance review at work where they told me what a great job I was doing and that they were going to give me a 3% raise for the next year. Interesting, the coincidence of the number 3, right? And then I'm looking at these numbers and realize, well, if these, like the teacher said, if you embrace these things will work. You need to walk your walk. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, God, this is one hell of a leap of faith to give away 10% of my income. And at that point, a scene from a movie jumped into my head. It was from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the leap of faith scene. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford with the fedora hat, like David was wearing. And, he's an archaeologist, adventurer, but he's also an expert in mythology and the comparative religious, and his father is too. We meet his father in this movie. So they're off on the hunt for the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail, the cup that Jesus drank out of at the Last Supper. Now, the symbolism of the Holy Grail is living an authentic life. Do you have the fulfillment of the highest spiritual potentialities of human consciousness? That's what the Grail is all about. Now, in the movie, though, they say if you drink from it, you'll have eternal life and heal any of your illnesses. Yeah, that's pretty much in alignment with what we know of the symbolism of the Holy Grail. But they're out there, and of course, a nice action-adventure movie, but they get to the climax of the movie where they think they know where the Grail is stored, but the bad guys get there ahead of them. It's in a cave in the middle of nowhere, and at the back of the cave is this tunnel, and there are spiritual challenges in the tunnel. And one person tried to go down there and was killed instantly by the first challenge. Now, they decide to manipulate Indiana Jones into doing it for them because they figure he probably can figure this out. The guy turns and shoots his father in the stomach. And so his father is bleeding out, and he's like, well, what are you going to do? And so Indiana Jones has in his pocket something his dad gave him a few minutes ago, which was a journal with clues on how to approach each of the spiritual challenges. The first one is a challenge of humility. Are you truly following, in the steps of Jesus Christ, and are you humble rather than being ego-driven? The second one is integrity. Again, are you following in the steps of Jesus Christ? But then there's the third one, and Indiana Jones is instructed to look for the silhouette of a lion's head up above him. And so I've got the 2-minute clip from the movie. Let's take a look for those of you who've seen it or haven't seen it in a long time. So this was the scene that jumped in my head. So I bravely wrote out a check for 10% of our gross income, and we sent it off. That week at work, they needed somebody to work overtime. So I worked overtime. It covered the 10% tithe. Wow, so did it again the next week. The next week, they needed somebody to work overtime. Great, it's covered again. I tithed. And then they say they need somebody to work overtime. I said, God, working overtime is not quite what I had in mind. But then, here Carla, like I mentioned, she had quit her job in human resources and had this training firm, and suddenly her business was taking off. And I had to really look at my belief system and my assumptions about life. I grew up as a blue-collar kid in Chicago. If Dad wanted more money to come in, he would work overtime. And, so sure enough, it was like, a reminder that, abundance can come to you through many various channels in this world, right? And so it was coming through Carla. It was a very valuable lesson. And as you heard, Carla and I then ended up a few years later quitting our jobs, going out there and just traveling full-time, teaching these prosperity principles to people. So, an authentic life, the Holy Grail. As I said before, there's no need to be more spiritual because you're already a spiritual being having a human experience. And it's up to us every day to remember that. Remember that. The Gospel of Matthew. I say to you, if you have a faith as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there. And it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. Each of us have this divine guidance by putting that faith out there. I call it the divine download. Our minds are already connected with the divine mind. So if we put out there a request, or if we just say simply, God, help, the divine idea comes to us. And there's two things you need to do, and that is, one, first believe that divine ideas exist, and then when they come to you, recognize that you're willing to express the ones that are right for you to express. And then you go forward and do that. Now, back when, in 1986, my life was rather unpleasant. I had not discovered unity yet. And I took a good, hard look at my life, and I figured out what was the root of all of my problems. The root of all of my problems was my first wife. I was certain of that. So we got divorced. I moved to my own apartment, and all of my problems were there waiting for me. So, I wisely was guided to a therapist who could kind of help me start sorting through my stuff. But I wanted a woman in my life. And this was 1986, before internet, dating, computers, so you had the personal ads. You could put a little ad in the paper, and then there would be the blind box. You'd mail it to the paper, put the box number on it, and they would pass it along to... So I composed my little ad, sent it off to the Chicago Tribune, and I waited. Nothing. Not one response. But then it occurred to me, well, you're sending your contact information to someone you don't know. It would be very scary for a woman, especially, to do that. So maybe I, as a guy, have to take my leap of faith and answer some of the women's ads. So I did that. I answered women's ads, got a couple calls, had lunch with a few people, but then I got this one call. And this woman's voice was just amazingly soothing to me. It was familiar. And we met, we had dinner together, and then we dated again and again. But the thing about this woman, compared to other women in my life, was that she could look right through me. She could stare into my eyes, down into my soul, and call me on all of my stuff. Hold me to be accountable, and she had this knack for bringing out the best in me, so I decided to marry her. And that's how I met Carla Golden in 1986. And Carla and I went through seminary together, and so we're both ordained ministers. But like I said, I want to wrap up by just giving you just a quick list of takeaways from what we talked about today. The first one is when we feel wisdom in our gut. So recognize that, that gut instinct is something. A lot of times people say, should I follow my head or should I follow my heart? And, well, there's something else there. There's wisdom that can probably find the right balance between the head and the heart. Number two, look beyond the storm. Look at outer appearances are really scary sometimes. Whatever your income is, or for as a church, revenues during an interim period, can be a little scary. So you need to look beyond the storm, reach out, remember that Christ consciousness is there for you. Number three, place your faith in God. Don't place your faith in anything in the physical world. Place your faith in God. Be open to that divine idea coming to you. Number four, believe in the divine ideas. And then, as I mentioned, number five, be willing to express them. That's all you need. Sometimes you don't know the end of the journey, but at least you get the next step on the journey, and you need to take that first step to see the next step. That's what it's all about. Now, I'm going to close with another passage from the Bible, from the Old Testament book of the Psalms, 139th Psalm, 7th verse. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in a smoldering garbage pit, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even your hand there shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace.